Begin with a welcome. Housekeeping matters for us here. Have all the meeting materials on the Early Childhood Education page on the Buncombe County website. That's engage.buncombecounty.org. Thank you very much. And also have an opportunity for you to sign up for public comment now. Just to give us enough time to allot for the number of speakers that we might have and folks who want to weigh in. So with no further ado, I was intended to introduce our new members, but I'm not sure that we have the full slate of them here yet. But
Pam.
Excellent. We have Pam. Pam's present. So Pam, you're going to have to take up the line, share the time then for the other folks so far.
And, Chair, we also have Heather participating virtually.
Excellent. I'm not sure if you can see us, Heather, but welcome. I figured it would be helpful to go around the room. We'll start with our three newest members. Just give you a quick second to introduce yourself, what your background may be, and tell us anything you want us to know. And we're certainly grateful to have you here, but any questions or thoughts you might have, we'd love to hear from you. And we'll start with Pam.
Thank you so much for including me. I'm very excited about joining the committee. I've been in Asheville since 1981. And during that time, with the exception of about 8 or 9 years, I had either foster kids, children, or grandchildren in the Asheville-Buncombe child care system, in quotes. And had different challenges and success stories throughout that time, depending on where I was in my life. And, you know, as a foster parent, I had a lot of support of DSS and placement. As you start to learn the ropes, you learn things. And by the time my grandkids were in childcare, I was able to help my daughter, who was a single parent at that time. So I've had that experience as a parent. And then professionally, I worked with Leslie and Carol at the city and at MAHEC in different times and lives. But primarily I was in human resources and saw the challenges that workers have in trying to find accessible and affordable early child care, and experienced it myself as a working parent. And then most recently, I've spent the last 8 years as a board member and officer on the Children's Center at Graceland Board, which is a small 5-star center up in North Asheville, and left that board in February and was looking for another opportunity to stay engaged in early childhood from a different perspective. And I talked with Leslie and Carol, and it sounded like a wonderful opportunity to tap my skills and interests, but also to challenge me in ways I haven't been challenged before.
Excellent. Thank you, Pam. It's a pleasure to have you. If we can switch to Heather, are you able to hear us? All right.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you all hear me?
Not able to hear you just yet.
Okay.
Let's see if I can stop presenting if that helps.
Can you hear me now?
No. Bear with us 1 second.
Try again.
Let's try one more time.
Okay. Can you guys hear me now?
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm sorry I'm virtual. I'm here at MAHEC Family Health Center, where I work as a behavioral health provider and on faculty. So I wish I could be with you all in person. I think most of the time it'll be virtual, but I appreciate being welcomed in. And yeah, I also have a long history in our community. I came to UNC Asheville for undergrad in 1989, and I stayed and have a couple of kids of my own that are one in college and one is a senior in high school, and was a working parent myself. And then, you know, had all of the struggles that many of our parents do with childcare. Like in the last dozen or so years, I specialized in early intervention and infant and young child mental health. So I'm passionate about early relationships in our community with parents and children and supporting that. So I've kind of been contracted with many of our agencies here, that some of which receive grant money from this community at different times, and also in early intervention. So I don't know, I felt like I needed to give back to the community in this way, and that maybe some of my experiences could be of support. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We're glad to have you. And I know Diana Anthony is actually on her way, so we will give her a chance to introduce herself later. But since we don't have name tags today, If we don't mind going around just introducing ourselves so everyone knows who they're chatting with, and we can connect after the meeting. If you don't mind starting us off.
Sure. Jasmine Beach for our Buncombe County Commission. Thrilled to welcome you both to the committee.
Martin Moore, Buncombe County Commission as well.
Al Whitesides, Buncombe County Commission, and welcome. Look forward to working with both of us.
Kit Kramer, Asheville Chamber.
Mark Taft, community member, retired educator.
Carol Steen, Vice President of HR for Biltmore Farms.
Linda McDaniel, the ARC of Buncombe County.
Rachel Sawyer Nygaard, and I'm on staff here at the county.
I'm Leslie Anderson. I have a consulting practice and I'm a child advocate.
Michael Fruit, Board Attorney.
And all the folks who are kind enough to join us. I'll let you introduce yourselves as well, because each one of you has been active participants in the past.
Nice, thank you. I'm Amy Berry, Executive Director at Buncombe Partnership for Children.
I'm Keelan Johnson. I work for Buncombe County Schools as the Early Childhood Workforce Coordinator. Betsy Stockslager, the Preschool Director with Buncombe County Schools Learning Labs.
Deanna Lamont, I work with Buncombe Partnership for Children as well, largely managing the NC Pre-K capacity building expansion grant that you all recommended for funding.
Hi, I'm Brian Repass, Community Action Opportunities Head Start.
Thanks, Brian. And Misty.
Hi, I'm Misty Cogbill. I'm wear a lot of hats in the county as a mentor and evaluator for NC Pre-K. I'm full-time with UNC Charlotte, and I'm also a doctoral student at Appalachian State in their Media and Technologies program focused on studying AI in early childhood.
Gosh, AI and early childhood.
I get stressed out just hearing some of that. Well, thank you for joining us, Diana. I didn't want to put you on the spot first, but we had the new members introduce themselves. We want to give you a chance to just share your name, a little bit about your background, and just welcome you formally.
Hi, thank you. Welcome, everyone. And I got to meet some of you as I observed last meeting. I'm Diana Anthony. I've been in Buncombe County for 2 years now. I'm excited to join the committee. I run Figure 8 Investments, which is a venture firm that's focused on education and healthcare. And I've also worked for a number of years as an early childhood educator. I was lost because I thought it was upstairs, and then we've changed rooms on me, so apologize, but glad I made it.
We switch it up just to see who's paying attention. Well, thank you all. If we've had a chance to review the minutes from October 3rd, did anyone have any corrections? Otherwise, I'll accept the motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. Motion and second. I think we can do it just by general acclamation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. Getting into old business, committee membership. Obviously, some of our efforts have been successful, bringing on 3 great folks. Certainly want to keep well-staffed, make sure that we're representing the most accurate and diverse set of our population here, and wanted to open some space for conversation about what representation would round out the committee based on what we have in terms of experience, background, current membership, potential membership. So if anyone had any thoughts on that, I just wanted to open the floor briefly on that, and then pseudo segue into a conversation about what other recruiting tools we may use. We are very fortunate to have the folks that we have here, but certainly want to make sure it's as inclusive and equitable as possible in how we're reaching our members. So just put both those out on the table and see if anyone had any thoughts on how we round out. I think we have at least 1 vacancy at this time. Is that correct, Rachel? So filling that final spot. I'm happy to start us off. I know we have some former educators here, so that's great. Folks who are representing different aspects, including healthcare. Is there any area that we've, I guess, kind of being intentional about the conversations, the meetings I've been in, is there any area that we think we've needed more direct insight on? Maybe that could be a potential recruiting base for us if there was one specific area that we found ourselves asking a lot of questions and just didn't have an expert in the room.
Well, I think this series we've done on workforce makes me wonder, I'm not sure of everybody's background and here to feel their talents are, but it seems like we might want to add someone given all the challenges we've lifted up in this arena. And I would say involving more people of color and younger people might also be something to think about.
And what I hear from some parents especially is that we need to make sure we have people, somebody with kids with disabilities, because that is a problem. That's a roadblock I hear from a lot of people, getting the kids in school and all. We need to be intentional about that.
And behavioral issues.
What'd you say, Linda?
Behavioral issues.
Oh, issues.
Well, my daughter's 35 now, but she was a painful teenager. So I guess I qualify in that word.
Well, they start very young, so she was a teenager.
Oh.
I can match you with 2 daughters.
They were painful. Mine was painful.
You didn't live in my house.
But there are a lot of issues being brought to the forefront with children very young, 2 and 3 years old.
Yes, which is a real challenge in early childhood centers.
Right.
For note taking on that, Commissioner Whitesides, was that a person who was a parent of children with special needs, behavioral issues?
Excellent contributions. And even beyond this one spot, just making sure that we keep this in the back of our minds, are there any subject matter experts that we feel we might want to consider adding in the future? I know we have staggered kind of points at which we were brought onto the board, but if there's any group that we anticipate meeting 6 months from now, or if one of you has some intention to resign, you may not. I'm asking you not to. So just to be aware of that, that's always a thought in my mind, that we keep our committee fresh and well-staffed in terms of experiences here. And we don't have to finalize that today, but to the extent folks have ideas, we're happy to field them. If anything comes to you after the meeting, please feel free to reach out to myself. Rachel will synthesize, bring it back to the group, and take any steps we need to.
What about geographic representation? I don't know, where we stand with that. Excuse me, I have a lozenge in my throat, so I don't cough too much. Just to look and see if we're reaching out in some of the more rural areas, maybe that's that perspective.
Rachel, would it be possible between now and next meeting for us to kind of do our normal workup, find out based on the applications? I know it asks what district you're in or what part of the city you're in based on zip code, if I remember correctly. Could we pull some of that and try to get a rough idea of what folks we have, and then kind of expand from there, maybe make some conclusion about what folks are reaching or not reaching and how we can improve our process a little bit.
So a summary of the current committee members, their areas of expertise, experience, demographics, if we have them, geography.
Well, if you're offering all of those, yes, but the geographic is being big.
I want to clarify, you're talking about the current appointed members?
Current appointed members, starting with geography. The other things are great. I know might be a little time exhaustive if we go.
There should be an application for every member.
Perfect. Thank you, Leslie.
I would just echo what Leslie shared with regard to having representation of someone who understands our Black and Brown communities and their needs, specifically from a child care, early childhood education, because I think there's some lack of representation on this group of understanding those communities to that level of intimacy.
I'll piggyback on that just to add, for whatever it's worth, if we think of any barriers to folks from different communities that might want to serve, what we can do to try to bridge that connect. If there are folks that want to and otherwise can't because of, I don't know, we could change the time, but if there's anything we can do to accommodate or remind them that Zoom is an option for some of those meetings, that might be worth at least offering to them. I cut you off, I think.
Good.
Well, if there are no other thoughts, I'll keep us moving, but thank you all for engaging in that thought process, and please feel free to share after the meeting if we have any follow-up on that. As far as new business, one, for folks who are at the last meeting are going to be very happy to see a potential revision of bylaws to adjust the quorum requirement. There are some rules around what we can and can't do. I appreciate our counsel, Mr. Frew, for addressing some of that. But my understanding is we did want to explore if we could change that ever so slightly. I believe the quorum right now is 9. Making a potential proposition or a document that's online, an amendment to allow us to move forward with 8 members. I don't anticipate that being an issue now, especially with 3 esteemed folks who will be making every single meeting, I'm sure. Just to prevent us from getting locked into being able to take action as we might have needed to in some pretty emergent circumstances. This space is changing a lot, and we're working through what the state gives or does not give us. And I would hate for us to feel hamstrung by one member not being present if the majority of us feel strongly about moving forward on something specific and necessary. If anyone has any concerns or thoughts, please let me know. That material's online if you'd like to see what that change would look like, but that's in effect what the change would be.
I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
My assumption is that the number is not dependent on the number of filled seats, but the total number of seats assigned to the committee.
I believe is that correct, Ms. Freer? I think it's 15 total, and we previously had 9.
So it's not impacted by vacancies.
No.
It's not impacted by what was.
Committee vacancies.
Oh, yeah. I was just looking here that says committee will consist of 15 members. Of course, there's 3 of y'all, and so then that's 12 others, right? That we have to appoint. So A would be 2/3-ish.
I think it works. So do you need a motion to that effect?
We'll love one.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. Thank you all. All right, and Rachel, I will turn it over to you for session 4 of our great series of early childhood education workforce focus. I think I am also doubling as a less effective version of Angelin today, so.
Angelin is with us online, and
Oh.
she's gonna present the slides on the Zoom part. So people watching virtually will have it on their screen nicely. People who are in the room, sorry, it's on the little screen. Johanna, my Intel Unite isn't connecting. If you're able to display it, that would be great.
I think I've got it up there.
There it is.
I never thought anyone could come as close to substituting for Angela, but.
Maybe a double dip.
Martin's showing you what a real chair can do.
There you go.
Okay, great. So people online and people in the room can see the slides. The next slide is a picture of the series as we have walked the path over the last 4 months. So we started in August with setting the stage, moved into the current landscape and promising practices in September and October. And here we are in November 2023, having a conversation about recommendations. So as a recap and refresher, not everyone who is here in the room today was present for every session. These are recorded and online at the engage.buncombecounty.org website. But as a refresher, session 1 was setting the stage. We had a great panel, which I feel like there was one more member of the panel whose name isn't on there, but we had a great panel following a presentation from Jenny Vile with Partnership for Children. We talked a lot in that session about what are the causes, what's driving the workforce shortage in early care and education. And we talked about some of the impacts that were coming out of it. Because there's a workforce shortage, what's that doing to care and slots and availability? And it was great to hear from the day-to-day perspective of groups that are funded and not funded by our early childhood fund. Next slide recaps session 2. So during the current landscape presentation, we took a look at the kind of definition of workforce development. What does it take to work in the field? The education pathways, financial assistance and support, looking at from end to end throughout the life cycle of somebody's professional experience in the early care and education field, recruitment, retention, development, and further education. And had another great panel of folks representing Buncombe County Early Childhood Fund supported workforce development programs. Then, on the next slide, you see we spent some time having conversation last month. As you were re-looking at the minutes from October, refreshing yourself about some of that conversation, it was great to bring a lot more voices into the room of committee members, and we hope to have some time today to hear some of your thoughts and perspectives. So really talking about what stood out as key issues. And also last month, we heard updates on the pressing developments that are occurring. We shared the survey results from when we reached out to grantees to ask them. There was a poignant question from a committee member about classrooms that were not able to open or slots that were not able to fill as a direct result of having teacher or assistant teacher vacancies. And the information they shared back about your vacancies was quite staggering. And even since then, we've heard continued anecdotes and seen in the paper about providers having to shorten their hours, close earlier in the day so they can get the coverage, and centers throughout the region not even staying open as a result of funding, which is connected to some of the workforce issues as well. So here we are now in session 4. Before we jump in, staying at the follow-ups from last meeting, the CDA, Child Development Associate Credential, thank you to Leslie from the committee for sharing about that last meeting. Staff compiled some information about that credential and put it in this meeting packet. So those of you who are curious about learning more about what this credential might bring in terms of the support for early care and education professionals in North Carolina, and that's available to you. We've also provided in your packet a couple follow-ups from Dr. Mims, who sends her regrets couldn't make it today, but we included some information about a report that came out of the Care and Learning Collaborative at Dogwood Health Trust, where they listened to stakeholders and published this report about needs. We included in your packet a list of grants that Dogwood Health Trust has been made recently through their early childhood cohort, specifically for workforce recruitment, retention, and nutrition. When they started looking at education as a key social determinant of health, they honed in on early care and education as a top priority, and when they looked at early care and education, we were in lockstep. It is no surprise that what rose to the top for Dogwood was the workforce. And so they've made a substantial amount of investment working with some of the same partners that we work with in Buncombe County and then across their regional footprint. So that information is available to you as well. A topic that we touched on briefly last meeting that we let you know we would be bringing back is the NC Pre-K expansion pilot that Deanna mentioned during her introduction a few minutes ago. So this building capacity in Buncombe County to expand NC pre-K availability and accessibility. This is the pilot project that grew out of this committee's study on pre-K expansion. What would it look like in our community to try to take steps toward universal pre-K? What would Buncombe's version of that be? We honed in on expanding the NC pre-K, which is a statewide system, expanding that within Buncombe County, but trying to address its barriers. And so we funded with a recommendation from this committee, but using federal dollars, one time ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, dollars for a 2-year pilot that started in July 2022. This year 1 report was provided to the committee in your, I think, July or maybe August meeting packet, and has been shared to the Board of Commissioners for Buncombe County as well, talking about what impacts the project has attained so far in its first year. As a quick refresher, they're working across barriers to providing, so addressing making participating in the NC Pre-K program work better for providers, centers, and they're also addressing barriers for families. So addressing enrollment, access, transportation, and wraparound care. So they've got this package of strategies that have been in place with one-time funding that will expire. We are in November of 2023. We're in fiscal year 24. We name it for the year it ends. So they've got, through the federal money, enough money to carry them through fiscal year 24. We worked with Buncombe Partnership for Children and appreciate their diligence. Once we had a state budget, they were able to get more clarity on financial projections. And they are currently projecting to have 186,000 remaining that could be used past that period of performance into fiscal year 25, which is the year we're starting to do grant making for right now, planned for. So the bottom line is the bottom bullet, which is if Buncombe Partnership for Children is to continue this pilot as a program beyond its pilot phase, their financial need would be $1,069,000, estimating that out of FY 25. The next slide has the staff recommendation, and this has a little bit more financial context for you. Our total available pool of funding under the influence of recommendations from this body for FY 25 will be $4.1 million. The exact number is written there. It's $4,104,330, which is, it's inclusive of that annual amount that commissioners have committed through their resolution that they'll budget with a 2% increase every year. Plus, Commissioner Beach, plus it has that carry forward. So when we moved the funds, there was a technical thing we did last year to make it a multi-year fund in case anything ever gets reverted, it stays with the fund. Best guess as of today, new funding plus carry forwards will have $4.1 million to work with for FY 25. If the NC Pre-K expansion request, which is shorthand for that longer project, building capacity and welcome to expand NC Pre-K availability and accessibility. If that were to get funded, the amount remaining for other grants would be just over $3,035,330.
So here today, we've been using all these sources that Peter cobbled together, and we haven't taken money out of our fund, but the 2%, whatever our fund is called, the long name. We haven't put any of that money into this pilot.
No, this pilot was exclusively funded with one-time federal dollars, which are expiring and won't be available.
Right, that's
past
what
the
I thought you were saying. I want to make sure.
So the staff recommendation is to invite Buncombe Partnership for Children, who won the bid to operate the pilot, to submit a proposal to continue it past its pilot through our regular grant process. That accomplishes a couple of things. Number one, from a government compliance perspective, that gives us a competitive application. We can't award $1 million to any project without some kind of competitive process. So it gives us logistically a good amount of cover. Otherwise, we would probably have to do an RFP, a request for proposals. But number two, it would allow this committee to consider its impact, it being the pilot, while also considering the proposals from other programs, other grant opportunities. Thoughts on that recommendation?
Just a question is whether or not Buncombe County Partnership for Children would be able to submit multiple grant applications in the next cycle, or they're limited to this one?
We do allow organizations to submit and receive funding for more than one project. Buncombe Partnership is an organization that already has multiple projects funded through the fund, and there are a few others that do as well, maybe a couple others.
I had a question as well. Is it correct to assume that the 1,069,000 would include sustaining all 6 strategies that they hope to implement during the 2-year pilot?
Yes. Based on what we know at this point, they've created a budget that supports the existing strategies.
And are any stabilization grant dollars part of the budget that they're reconciling and coming up with this number?
I might hear squirming behind me, so we'll have to defer to the chair if we want to invite conversation with Buncombe Partnership, who's in the room at this time. But what I would say is we have worked with them on a philosophy to use local dollars last.
Okay.
Because Buncombe County, as a funder in the early care, in the child care space, if you will, we're entering into a system that's highly supported by federal and state dollars. And we don't want to take action at the local level that then creates a dependence on local funds.
Right.
So we want to get the most out of those other funding sources. So when something comes up, like the emergency funding, like a stabilization grant, we have conversations about how to work that into the budget.
Okay.
And the other comment is the proposal, the budget form that we would get through this process has both a revenue side and the expense side, so we would be able to see what they anticipate growing and then which expenses they would anticipate funding our dollars. Thank you.
The other grants, how repetitive are they? And one thought I have is that if every year a particular center is relying on a grant for something that's a reoccurring cost, then they will, as an impact of this, have to reduce the amount requested or received.
That's an important dynamic, and to the extent possible, we want to use these funds, and the committee has worked to prioritize things that can be a one-time cost or a startup cost, and it's a starved system, and so we know that there are programs that rely on these funds for operational ongoing needs, like paying their teachers, that those costs are going to be there year after year. So that it would be important, I think, to look at unintended consequences like interruption to other funding if we were to make room out of a $4 million fund for one thing.
by going through the grant application process, will the assessment around achieved goals be the same for this pilot extension? And will it be deemed a pilot extension where they're usually in a pilot you're okay to fail and you're even better, great to succeed and replicate. So I just didn't know if we were planning on the county's assessment process to remain the same for this particular application.
In theory, they would be able to respond on the results and impact questions, which prompt the applicants to look at previous and projected impact, and put all of that on. We also know it's a lot to try to convey something this complex in a grant application. So there is a way for them to put links or supplemental info.
And there's not a way for the committee or county to add additional expectations within the accountability for this grant because it's part of an overall grant process.
I have to think that too.
And I know that in previous years, we've had different emphasis on different things. I mean, for example, early on, we were talking about slots a lot. And I still would like to see more slots, and we're just not getting there. We're just not. And so that has to be a discussion in and of itself, in my opinion. I also think, I mean, part of these grants, I love them and I hate them because so much work is ginned up, so much effort is used to gin up the work for a grant, and then the money's gone. And if you can't sustain it, oh well, flush all that effort. So part of me thinks, let's think about, let's have that discussion and think about extending that work and have them present what would happen. Where would the emphasis be? I am just really frustrated that we're not able to move the needle as much as we've wanted to. And I don't know if, and I think we need to have a discussion about what's realistic to expect. And if it's not on the number of slots, where is the emphasis and how do we show that we're actually making a difference? For example, on quality or whatever we decide the emphasis is going to be. I would be in favor of them being part of the process, but I want to hear, I'm not saying we fund it automatically. I want to hear what they'll do as a result of an extension of this funding and what will happen as a result. That would be my preference, I think. Because I just see, I hate all this money going into projects and then it just kind of withers away because there's no ability to maintain the administration, or there's a lack of capacity without the existing dollars still being there. But that being said, I really am worried about slots. Slots is, I mean, it's critical.
It is, and you can't do slots without having teachers.
Right, and workforce.
And yeah, workforce. I mean, to teach the slots, it sounds so terrible, but the children, they're so inextricably linked. And since we're in the first year of the pilot, and this is their report from their first year, right? So since it's a pilot, it would be really nice if we could look at the results from 2 years of a pilot.
Yeah.
But does that fit into the timing?
Unfortunately, no. When the committee will make its grant recommendations for fiscal year 25, that work needs to be completed by April.
Yeah.
And their year 2 report won't come out until July. So that's part of why we put a lot of emphasis in looking at the degrees for year 1 report. And we get monthly reports from them, the spreadsheets with the progress toward the goals. And we do have a presentation scheduled, I think, at this time for January when we did our roadmap to have them come back and let us know how it was going, thinking that would be another 6 months, or at least
Yeah, that makes sense.
another half a year's worth of service.
Maybe a year and a half's worth.
Before we try and make a decision on that. Yeah, please.
I've got a couple of comments. I guess the first one is, to me, NC Pre-K seems to be a critical piece of our early childhood landscape. So I commented, so therefore we need to do whatever we can to support NC Pre-K. It sort of, again, ties into the slot piece. I've also been one on the committee that said, there's a piece that we need to recognize is going to be ongoing funding needs. Because let's face it, our K-12 system has regular, ongoing funding that takes place. And for us not to do that in the same way for early childhood education is a travesty, in my opinion, that we've got to do that. The other piece, going back to what Kid was saying, Leslie was saying, we know, slots are crucial, but we can't get the slots without the workforce. So again, if, peeking ahead to the next slide, if we were looking at priorities, for future discussion, to me, it's got to be around workforce.
Would you flip us to the next slide, please?
It just, without that, we can't do anything. We can't create slots. We can't, we're just done. We don't have a workforce. So my bias is that we look for really creative ways to jumpstart a workforce. And I was looking at, what Leslie shared about the national credential, saying, again, thinking about, 120 hours of study, if we pay people $20 an hour to do that 120, it's only $2,400.
Yeah.
We could use a lot of that money to jumpstart a lot of people into the credential. But we're going to need, obviously, someone to oversee that and someone to apply, for a grant to do that. But if we don't get the workforce, we're done.
With the NC expansion, I'd like to see us move towards tracking a metric of slots or estimating a slot metric. So maybe if it's like we've put, 10 educators in the classroom, they, can represent a capacity, each one represents a capacity of 15 students, so that's 115 slots created or something like around, maybe it's too simplistic, but I'm wondering if we could think about tracking slots created by the NC expansion, because I imagine that there definitely are slots created. It's just, what are those slots? I don't know.
And the answer is, it's complicated.
Yeah.
We had this opportunity to launch this innovative and also yet evidence-inspired set of strategies during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the early ed system was particularly hard hit. Not something that you can really accomplish as well virtually, childcare. So what we see in their results is good participation in the teacher recruitment and training, good results for those teachers.
But it's not predictive. Anything that happened during that time was just such an outlier that we don't know.
But our slot count,
right?
It's something that's
right.
Not in this.
I mean, I'm wondering if and people in the room don't freak out because it's just an idea. If we were talking, for example, about, I'm enamored with this concept of the expansion of in-home childcare that seems to be uniquely Western North Carolina oriented, and it may have to be a model. I know Dogwood is going all in on that, but quality, so maybe it's something related to how we enhance the quality of those in-home care positions that are far more likely to be created as slots rather than ones that are reliant upon hiring a bunch of people when we haven't effectively impacted what they're being paid. And it's lovely to think about us as Buncombe helping these various childcare centers supplement, but it's not sustainable for the long run. It's really not. And so I don't know. I'm thinking, do we need to think strategically about where we're putting money and effort that are gonna result in more kids being cared for? I don't know.
So I think that speaks to like this balance of having access to childcare, but then also kindergarten readiness, which I think is also, an important focus that I think Buncombe County Partnership for Children is really focused on, is that quality education to prepare them for their academic experience. And that's, the funding needs to address all of those areas. And I think this particular staff recommendation sounds like it's really focused on what's the methodology to get to that funding proposal. Is it outside of the grant process or is it within the grant process? Is that kind of...
Yes, and getting it on cycle with all other requests. Mm-hmm. Something I notice, I'll look across the table at the 3 commission members of this committee. If we come to you during a non-budget time of the year and just present to the Board of Commission about a really worthwhile project, they're inclined to want to support it because it's a one-off project. And if we come during budget season for setting priorities for the entire year, and there's a fixed amount that they have to be able to work with, and it's within that pool, those unintended consequences of funding something are more clear. So for me, it makes sense that we consider, if this committee wants to recommend carrying this pilot forward, that we consider that as part of our annual recommendation. Whether or not the how we pay for it, I would also say commissioners can have a different perspective on this based on their vantage point. As staff, we are seeing it's a challenging financial budget to prepare for, and I think that asking for that additional funding as an investment over and above the early childhood fund might it would be entered into a highly competitive environment and would not get funded.
It seems like I remember that one of our graphs in one of our presentations, to Kit's point, was this dramatic drop in the number of family child care homes pre-COVID, but some year that was selected, and now, I mean, it's like 100 lost or some big number. And I think you have a good point, Kit, that I would like to know what that was about. For some, it's, I just can't make a living wage for my own family on caring for these 5 other little family members. Some, they've been in the business for 35 years, just retired. Or, there are a variety of reasons, I think. And there's certainly there's a National Family Child Care Association, and it would be interesting to look at some of their data. It's what's happening now in the field. But I think it's good to take a look at a lot of options, and then looking at what Dogwood is funding now. I think there's some things here in their pilots or whatever they're calling these, their grants, that might be interesting for us to look at. We've talked about the BK degree, for instance, and there's a project they're funding at Western that sounds very interesting. try to ramp up and people getting the VK. So maybe we need a.
So let me ask a question, if to move this conversation along. Is the question, do we put it as part of the funding cycle for the rest of the grants?
Yes, so we had two
I think we
recommendations.
should. I think we should include it, that we don't know what will happen. We'll have a full conversation, but I think it should be part of that. The continuation should be part of the grant process. I make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Kit. We're bringing a very swift conclusion to the heated discussion there.
And lots more to talk about, of course.
The additional element is, do we also want to, within the early childhood fund for any other projects, call out workforce based on what we've learned over the last 3 months, and either prioritize it or require it, that workforce development must be a part of your project, and have them explain how. And I could see, I looked at the currently funded projects to try to see how would workforce be a part of this, and it's probably a part of all of what we do and all of what we've done, but prioritizing it would allow us to sort of evaluate the extent to which a workforce impact is going to be made by the complex. That was an idea, not coming to you as a recommendation, but coming to you as an idea, because we are writing the grant guidelines for the next cycle that is going to happen next month. So now is the time if we want to tweak our application or criteria.
All right. I have a bias. I don't think that our supplements to salaries is a sustainable model. And yet, if people are using that supplement as a major part of their application, that would certainly be thinking about workforce as part of it. So when you say workforce development, are you talking salary supplements? Or are you talking education? What are you talking about?
Maybe we would need to make a list of categories within that so we can organize it. Is this helping with compensation?
Mm-hmm.
Is this helping with development?
Right. Or Rachel, is it a program that is kind of a pipeline of teaching assistants working toward further education and how they're moving forward in their own school to support either, creation of workforce? I think there needs to be a lot of definition in what we expect them to say for that. But I agree with Kit. Payroll has been a struggle.
Just being sensitive to time, at I'm going to ask anyone who wants to do public comment by 2:05, if you don't mind signing up behind Rachel. We'll bring that over and leave an appropriate amount of time, but I'd like to continue this discussion since I think we're kind of setting what our priorities and values are going to be. I did have a question based on something Ms. Steen raised earlier. It might be helpful just to know what our tools are in terms of assessing priority. So maybe that can be, I'll take it if you want, Rachel. Well,
can I just pass it down?
Yeah.
Thank you. Leave the room and come back and get it.
It seems like a big room, but no space behind anybody.
Yeah, just finding out what our tools are for assessing what priority we want to give any particular topic or goal would be a useful kind of framework for it, because I think a lot of this could be addressed with a just really well fleshed out kind of set of priorities and modus operandi for how we're going to go into the next grant making process.
As a reminder, we have 5 strategies that we look for applications to align with any one or more of the strategies, which is slots, quality, workforce, family support, family and student support, and overall system effectiveness. Regardless of whether we make it formal, staff will definitely convey in the consultations and the grant workshops the importance of workforce as a, we've seen the committee spend a lot of time working on this year, and we know the committee is going to be interested in seeing that in your proposals. So that will happen regardless. If we want to take it a step further and highlight that as the committee's priority this year, that could be one further step to elevate workforce.
And just building on that last point, I think a number of the projects that we funded last year included piloting strategies related to workforce development. So we are likely to be hearing back from grantees that have 9 to 12 months of lessons learned from those specific strategies. So given how many of those strategies we funded last year, I think there's a strong case to be made for maybe for elevating this as a particular priority, but also really inviting returning grantees to kind of engage with us on like what's working, what's not. You know, I mean, I think we saw, you know, what it basically comes down to is lots of different attempted channels for trying to move additional money to people who are not making enough money to keep them in the field. And it can be via salary or offsetting, you know, tuition, but it comes down to just how people aren't making enough and we're trying to move money to them. So anyway.
They can't recruit because they're wouldn't.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think we sometimes overcomplicate something in here that's actually quite straightforward, which is just, this is a sector that is chronically underpaid. And whether we move financial assistance to people by matching savings funds or by offering tuition incentives or by adding a supplement on, it all comes down
compensation
to basically trying to move compensation to people who, you know, and create a structural shift within a field. So, you know, I think I would invite us to kind of maybe just think of it in terms as simple as that, and that different centers may find that different strategies work for their workforce or for the needs of the folks who are attracted to that center, and that we have a lot of kind of co-learning to do with grantees and sort of leaders in the field locally about if we can move the needle on this, and can we move it sufficiently that it actually starts to create increased retention, increased diversity within the field, all those things.
I agree with what Jasmine's saying, and you know, I keep thinking about the workforce piece, and there are really, to me, two key components. One is the retention of the workforce, and that ties directly to compensation, benefits, all of those pieces. But if we had if all of our current workforce stayed with us, we wouldn't be adding any more slots. So we still need to develop new people into the field. So I don't think it can be an either or. I think it's got to be both. We've got to keep the people we have, and then we have to jumpstart a workforce to get them into the field and then keep them in the field. Because just, again, as I said, just keeping everyone we have would be great and a great start.
Although we're behind right now.
We've
lost. How many did we lose? I remember making our report to the county commission, and I know there's been a more recent one made, but it was depressing. We were trying to package that message as a pandemic wrapped package. So, I mean, part of me wonders if our slots priority, which ultimately I want them to be high quality, but I want slots. And are we fooling ourselves if an emphasis is on slots because we haven't addressed the workforce issue? I don't know that we can either. You know what? I'm depressed today. I've had bad news all day and I'm just piling it on. Sorry.
So we are going to bring a draft grant guidelines to the next meeting. Look at ways that we can reflect this. The last slide in the presentation was essentially other ideas if this committee outside of the mechanism that we have, which is perhaps the most powerful tool of the fund. Outside of that, are there other ideas that the committee want to have discussion around workforce?
Have we spoken to the like for-profit companies like Wonder School that do that support in-home child care about how they might work with Asheville? I believe that there was something recently where they were in Atlanta. So I'm wondering what sort of for-profit partnerships we've discussed.
I'm making a note of that. I'm familiar with the name through some of our conversations with Buncombe Partnership, but I've not had much exposure to their work.
I am acquainted with them. If we ever wanted a presentation from them, I could arrange.
I would love to see, I would love to hear that. I don't know how anybody makes this a business proposition that is profitable. I'd really like to hear that. That would be interesting to
I
me.
think what's really interesting about this grant program that's different than some of the county's other grant programs is that it doesn't have to be a nonprofit or a public organization that gets funded. Our grants, based on consultation with county legal, this is something that we can fund regardless of the type of entity that's providing it. So we have a grantee at this time that's a different status other than nonprofit. So there's space to even work with groups like that with funding. Although this was a what else beside funding prompt, so I don't know if that's where your mind was, but it might be a way to participate even in that way.
Rachel, is it possible to, in your notes, or I don't know if it's in the minutes so much, but to compile what we learned through these 4 excellent conversations we've had, just to try to gather up the inspirations or findings or whatever, and then maybe to look at the grants that we're funding. I know we had those 10 that we saw in one of our presentations. I think we're funding 10 of them that specifically workforce oriented. And we all have workforce problems, but grants that we funded to try to deal with the workforce issue. I'm going to try to just sort of pull some of this together so we could make some real recommendations by having compiled the data, work off of the same page.
I hear your question and would like to see what others on the committee think.
It may not be valuable.
Is there more research or reporting?
It wasn't so much more research, just trying to pull together, and doesn't have to be extensive report, but some of what we learned or what the committee members offered as concerns or remedies or whatever. I don't mean for it to be a lot of work, just
we're here to help as long as we can get clarity on what the committee is provisioning for us to
appreciate that. And others may not feel it's useful.
Yeah, just processing what Leslie shared. I think, we've gone through this learning process together as a committee to try to understand and focus on solutions that will really move the needle on workforce pipeline, retention, and continue to grow that number. And so I think going into the next cycle, maybe I'm trying to say what you're saying.
No, you're on it. Yeah.
Is there a way to have maybe just a short summary of what are the core solutions that have been offered through this learning session that we could keep as top of mind for as we look at future proposals, not as a criteria, but just as a lens of these were things that have worked or that experts have identified as effective strategies that we would want to continue to fund
I think
forward.
That's good. Like this family child care home, well, that's something we may want to pursue, but just got brought up today, they get lost. At least as my brain sits down and tries to figure out where to go.
Well, and my takeaway of the whole learning experience was, just the bare maintaining credentials to be an educator. It seems to be like there's some opportunity for intervention there to streamline that process for individuals, but there seems to be some inefficiencies there.
Right.
When I hear that conversation going forward, processing what this looks like, it's occurring to me that that would be extremely helpful, at least in me formulating how long we want to give different strategies to work, because it seems like we're very focused on metrics. What is the outcome? What is the outcome? What is the outcome? But if we're not expecting this to happen in a year, and then a year later we're saying, why isn't it happening? I just want some clarity from us so we can have present sense of time of how long we think it's going to take to implement, and then be able to go back and say,
Good idea.
this is what we need on this timeline. Because I don't think any of us believe it's going to happen in a year, 120 hours, full degree at some point. So, but having that metric, I think will help us judge how successful our efforts are, and we can pivot as needed as we go.
That is the end of the slides that I brought in.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for facilitating a great discussion and for giving us a full series that really helped me it almost felt perfect rolling on to commission and the board and seeing the many angles through which we have to view this. I do think the panels would be helpful in the future as we have more needs and as our needs change to continue to have that dialogue with our partners, because I found it informative. I won't speak for everyone else, but good priority setting.
Yeah, it was really energizing to engage with our partners in that way.
Yeah, that was good.
Excellent. Well, do we have any announcements? I didn't know you might have had one, possibly.
Oh, can I add one too? Sorry, can I be on that list? This is me.
Of course. Tell you what, you can start us off.
I just wanted to take a minute or two. I know that some of you knew that Warren Wilson College was doing a study and looking at their fiscal moving forward, and that the early childhood department is one of those areas that will be phased out at the end of this year. And I just want to honor the fact that we have had a lot of good work together. Myself and Ashley McMillan have been adjuncts with them for a while, worked with Maura Davis and with Pat Tuttle, and that has been an amazing program. And considering the workforce, I just want to honor the thought that that was a great partnership and that produced a lot of work. And I'm sorry to see it go, but I also want to just honor the fact that it was there. And as we move forward and considering what opportunities we're going to offer in our area, considering that as that's being phased out at the end of this school year.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. I knew they were in the process of figuring out what would move forward, but I didn't know they'd made decisions already. So thanks for taking a moment to name that.
The announcement that was on my mind is related to an email among the committee about the closure of child care centers in the region. Southwestern Child Development announced that they are closing, by this date, have already closed a number of centers outside of Buncombe County, elsewhere in Western North Carolina. Based on my understanding, they're still operating Valley Child.
That's right.
Which is located in Swannanoa on the campus of Buncombe County's community high school. We do not fund that project at this time.
Oh, we didn't fund them this year?
No.
Okay, we have funded them for 3 years.
We Buncombe County government have historically funded Valley Child for longer than, for at least a decade.
Oh, okay.
That funding pre-existed the early childhood and then it ended up getting rolled in. And it didn't make the cut this year in terms of scoring and priority, and didn't receive funding. So I've not been in touch with Valley Child to discuss their situation.
More cheery news.
What'd you say?
More cheery news.
Yeah, I know.
It's tough.
It is.
It really is. I mean, you look at the arc of Southwestern over 50 years, what they've done before most people even knew their childcare system existed. Sheila Hoyle, their longtime director, has been a real stalwart.
Yeah.
And,
well, and, you know, I just know statistics about labor, and a good, at least 40% of the labor that works here in Buncombe County comes from throughout the region.
Yeah.
So undoubtedly, working parents who have jobs in Buncombe were impacted by those closures.
mm-hmm.
So while Buncombe wasn't as directly impacted, it's still indirectly impacted.
Exactly. 300 slots.
Rachel, I'd probably ask for at some point some follow-up discussion about that, just to see if that changes anything for us, or what it changes for us and what we can do to respond to the very unfortunate circumstance there.
I think that as part of the January landscape conversation, it might fit in. That's when we bring in our partners at Buncombe Partnership to give us that picture of slots and workforce and that system level information that we have. How many family childcare homes, so different types, different quality, all of that good detail.
Thank you for that. Not that everyone would use all 3 minutes, but if I do my math correctly, we have just enough time for everyone to give their full public comment. So I will start us off unless anyone has an objection. Pepe?
Sure. Is this an appropriate place for me to?
Wherever you like.
Thank you, Martin. My name is Pepe Acebo. For folks who are new to the committee, I am at this point have shed most of my titles and am a parent who's an advocate largely in Asheville City Schools and for Asheville City Schools and for early childhood education. I do serve as a community board member of a local charter school, but I don't have any kids or other investment with that. I want to, because it's come up, I want to point out that continuity of funding really affects slots, and I do recall a former board member for Asheville City Schools, Peyton O'Connor, talking about how sometimes this process of grants can feel like a Hunger Games, and you might want to add continuity as part of your rubric for evaluating grants. You might want to expand grants to just over the county line, looking at serving other workforce in Buncombe County. We have a lot of folks who commute into the county to serve. I do want to point out that Asheville City Schools found itself cannibalizing ECE staff who were qualified to be instructional assistants because instructional assistants were leaving. And so there are shifts that have been going on in our public schools, moving staff out of preschool supporting slots into slots that support elementary schools as instructional assistants. And as the pay there is depressed and doesn't keep up with inflation, people leave those roles. So we've got this churning from ECE into our public schools and just a staffing crisis all around. So shoring up funding for teachers and staff does help shoring up funding and having enough staff for early childhood education. And the biggest thing is, thank you for being here. I really appreciate the work of this committee and the work of the commissioners to support early childhood education. Do your best to get 441 Haywood Road back in operation for us so we got some more slots, and that's it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have Caitlin Johnson.
Keelan Johnson. I've been with Buncombe County Schools for over 10 years, close to 15. And I taught early childhood and child development at Irwin High School in our family consumer science programs. This year I stepped into a new position, which is funded by Public Health Trust. I'm still with Buncombe, but it's geared towards early childhood workforce development. Positive news, what I can say is when I've been going around to different centers and working on building relationships as we hope to get all of our high schools, whether they have a preschool on site or not, connected with centers. I've been pleasantly surprised to go into environments and someone say, oh, I did the high school program, or this student had this program at our high schools. And so while I know it doesn't move the needle, you know, just yesterday I was in a school where someone said, oh, I have so-and-so, and they were my student 4 years ago and we didn't know they were there. So the programs that we do fund, and they are working. And you know, with the Warren Wilson program, I was just up at the Collins Center, and two of the folks there who are running the show, it's an incredible center, over 100 kids being served went through this program. That was one of the, you know, programs several years ago. So just a good news piece that some of these programs that we are funding are really holding things together. But I wanted to also just acknowledge the commission, commissioners in this committee, because it's really supported and elevated our programs within Buncombe County Schools. And I wanted to extend an invitation on the last Thursday of every month. We now have a newly created early childhood committee that meets within Buncombe County Schools. And Commissioner Moore and I spoke about that and about possibly attending, that you could attend. And just mentioning that, you know, among to our committee definitely elevates interest among leadership to participate and be present. And so I just wanted to extend that to everyone to say come on down, as that really helps create conversations as they're happening at the county school level, and how important it is for y'all's voice to be a part of that. So thanks for your time and thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next up, we have Amy Berry.
Hello, I'm going to speak quickly because you raised so many excellent points, and I feel myself wanting to respond to all of them. So I am going to focus on a key issue, which is stabilization. We are currently at the most precarious point in childcare than we have ever been. And that's not anyone's fault. It's a larger system failure with not enough investments at the federal and state level. We're seeing this, we've heard across the state, but we are terrified about the position that we're in. And that's not to say give up, it's all doom and gloom. That's to say it's really important to recognize the moment that we're in right now and what can we do. So I've been talking with our staff about what is possible and what is impactful. That's where we have to show our energy. So for folks who haven't had a chance to digest the year one report, I call it a couple of things to go back and really look to. And one is that, you know, so much of the money was around the reimbursement rate for NC Pre-K, filling that gap between true cost of care, what the state rate was, and another major component of funds was around supplementing teacher salary, recognizing that teacher pay is so much retention and recruitment, and that we did reduce turnover. And I said stabilization to begin with, so let me circle back to that. Is that correct? Sort of stabilize and expand, that we can't expand slots until we stabilize. And we hoped that we would be further ahead, but that is where we're at. And we feel good about the stabilization that has happened within that program. So we've maintained all those providers. We brought on 2 new providers, have 5 providers who we're working with right now to become NC Pre-K providers. So some real progress there, but we need more state money to expand NC Pre-K slots. But we have to maintain what we have and beyond NC Pre-K across the continuum of early care and education Rooster 5 is absolutely essential. And workforce is a key piece of that. We're also looking at work you'll see in there of the number of early educators who work with our staff to continue their education. And some of that is around getting a stipend for completing a course. And that has proved to be a very positive tool. Lastly, I'll say, get difference between family, friend, and neighbor care and family child care home. So that's something maybe we can talk about in the January presentation. And we have worked with Wonder School before. We're one of the few counties that accepted a grant from PCDE during the first year of the pandemic. So we have experience there and can share some pros and cons. So thanks to everyone for your deep commitment, your good thinking. I appreciate all of you so much and what you're doing.
Thank you, Amy. And Brian.
Hi, everyone. I'm just saying. First of all, I always say I really appreciate all the work that you all do, and what everyone else has said. Y'all make the hardest decisions. It's hard writing the grants and putting the grants in and deciding what to do and how to do it. But listening to y'all have to make those decisions it also recognizes how hard that is. I wanted to point out a couple of quick things. And I wanted to, I wake up every morning, I'm like, oh, it's so stressful, so down, so many hard. I want to talk about the great things that this committee has done over the past couple of years. You know, it's put out some amazing projects. And led by the commissioners and staff and everyone here. And I just can't even, the advocates over the years and years in Buncombe County to make a difference that y'all are making, it's unheard of. You know, there's very few counties in the state that are doing it as well as Buncombe. So first of all, I just want to thank you all for that, recognize that. The other thing is the Buncombe pre-K program. It is amazing. We came in and we have elevated our teacher salaries, our pre-K teacher salaries, to be equivalent with Buncombe County Schools and Ashland City School salaries. That's amazing, right? That's unheard of. Again, that's unheard of. You know, to take early childhood education, where years ago, our assistants were making $13.50, $12.49, and now they're making $16, $17 an hour. We've got teachers making $30, $35 an hour, competitive. The challenge with that is that if we lose those dollars, we either have to reduce the number of children we're serving significantly, or I can't imagine going back to those teachers and say, you know what, we're taking that money back from you. And to what that would do to the workforce. And I do go back to the pay, for instance, my timer. The pay is base for workforce, right? Like we can't recruit people to come into the field if the pay is so low that it's poverty wages. And so, you know, I think that really maintaining that part of the Buncombe pre-K program and supporting that really is key to everything. And that's hard to say because we do benefit from a lot of the grants and do a lot of great work with the grant funding that we have. But I also, the providers raise their salaries in good faith. And as I look around the committee, I see amazing people, and I know that we can ask for that money. We might not get it. It's going to be a really competitive environment for the budget. But I have the faith in you all to be able to go in and say, look, you know, these are the outcomes that we're having. This is the base to our community for education, for workforce, for other jobs, to go in and make that difference that y'all have already made and maybe boost that commitment by that $1 million so we can continue funding the great project we're already funding, add in that funding that we're doing for Buncombe pre-K, and continue the great work that we're doing. We're making progress. I know it's hard to see and it's hard to recognize, but we've hired more people at the beginning of this year than we hired in the previous 2 to 3 years, and we're continuing that hiring. So let's keep up the good work. Y'all keep up the good work. Ask for more money. We might get it.
Yay, let's
Brian.
clap for progress.
Well, I appreciate all of y'all. Just to keep everyone on their toes, the next meeting on December 5th will be in room 310, not down here. Same time, 1 o'clock, 200 College Street. Go go ahead and adjourn and appreciate all of you. We'll have more positive news next time. It'll be a slightly less depressing meeting. Have a great afternoon, y'all. Can I get actually, do we need a motion to adjourn? Is that required?
Moved.
I'll adjourn this one.